Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my friends. Whenever you are watching this video, welcome back to another math time with me, Miss X. Let's begin by taking a look at our objectives. Remember, our objectives are always broken up into three separate parts so we know exactly how we're going to do something, what it is that we need to understand, and why we're doing it or why it's important. Read with me or in your head as I read out loud to you. I will use square tiles to show rows and columns in order to see part, and whole. This is so important. Let's begin with our vocabulary because we need to understand our vocabulary in order to understand our objectives. We have rows and columns as the first part of our math vocabulary. Remember, rows are like movie theaters where they go from left to right, horizontal, or across. And columns, you might see these in very big, huge, fancy buildings. They help hold up a building roof. And so we can think of columns as up and down or vertical. Next up, we have array. Array is a way of organizing a set of objects into rows, which is across, and columns, which is holding it up and down. And then lastly, we have a new one today, which is decompose. Decompose is the practice of breaking something into parts, then that together those parts are the same as the original. We will look more closely at decomposing in the teacher model.
All right, friends and families, welcome to the first part of our teacher model. For the first part of our teacher model, we are going to be practicing drawing tiles because we won't always have our tile friends to help us out with making arrays. So the first part of being able to do an array or create an array with tiles is being able to practice drawing tiles without the actual tiles themselves. Let's start with making one square in the middle of our paper here. I'm going to begin with the left side of the square. Just like that. Great. Now I'm going to take that out, and then I'm going to go ahead and draw the next part or the next one across. Is the length of the line that we just drew, is it about the same length as the first one? Yes. So let's go ahead and keep going. Now let's draw the bottom of the square, and then let's finish up by drawing the right side of the square. Great. Now it looks a lot like our tile friend. It's very important that you close the square. This will help us make a proper tile. Let's go ahead and keep going so that we can draw 3 rows of 3 squares. And I'm going to extend the top and the bottom. Make sure it's closed. Extend the top and the bottom. Make sure it's closed. And try that one again. Remember, it's really important that you make sure it's closed. I'm going to now make my second row. So I finished my first row. I'm going to make my second row now. Making sure that they look pretty much the same. I'm going to draw. Great, I finished my second row. Let's go ahead and do our third row. Oh, make sure it's closed. Oh, this side looks a little bit too short. Let's try that again. Wonderful. Great, and then let's go ahead and keep going. And my friends, you do your best. It does not need to be perfect, but it does need to be neat. Now I have my 3 rows of 3 squares. What shape did we end up making? Yeah, we made a square. and we made 3 rows of 3, as well as 3, I'll write it up here, as well as 3 columns of 1, 2, 3, 3. So this is a square, and I have 3 rows of 3 and 3 columns of 3. And that's what makes a special rectangle or a square, is when we have the same amount of columns as the amount of rows. So we have the same amount of columns and the same amount of rows with the same in each one. That's what makes a special square, or sorry, a special rectangle, also known as a square. Now, if we were to go back and look at just 2 rows of 3, what shape is this? Yeah, it's a rectangle. And in this rectangle, we have 2 rows of 3 and then 3 columns of 2. That's what made it a rectangle. We don't have the same amount of rows as we do the columns, but we have the same amount in each group if you look at it by rows and then by columns. Let me explain a little bit what I mean by that. So it's a rectangle, and it doesn't have the same amount of rows or columns. There's only 2 rows, but there's 3 columns. However, the groups are equal because when we're looking at columns, there's 2 in each column. And then if we're looking at rows, there's 3 in each row. So that's what makes it a rectangle and an array. And remember, arrays have to have an equal amount in each group, even if they don't have the same amount of rows and columns. Alright, friends and families, welcome to the next part of our teacher model. For the next part of this teacher model, we are going to use tiles to construct a rectangle with 4 rows of 5. Let's go ahead and do that. 4 rows of 5. And remember, my friends, rows go across. This is so important to remember. Rows go across. 4 rows of 5, meaning then that there's going to be 5 in each row, and I'm going to have 4 rows. Alrighty. Let's go and keep going. I have 3 rows of 5 so far. I gotta keep going. Now I have 4 rows of 5. I'm going to go ahead and make sure they're linked without any gaps or overlaps. I have to make sure that there's the same amount in each group before I connect them. Okay, so now I finished with my 4 rows of 5. I also came to the conclusion that our solution is 20, or our total is 20. And there are 20 tiles because 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals 20. Another way that I can look at it is also there are 20 because 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 is equal to 20. I'm going to go ahead and put them together now. Just like that. Do your best to not have any gaps or overlaps. Let's go ahead and now think more deeply about our array. How can we break this rectangle or decompose this rectangle into 2 equal parts? And remember, my friends, decompose means to break up. So how can we decompose this rectangle into 2 equal parts? Go ahead and pause here and talk to your friend or family member first before we work together on it as a team. All right, my friends, welcome back. I know that 10 plus 10 makes 20. And I remember that I have 20 as my total or my whole amount here. So what we could do is put 10 on one side and then 10 on the other. If we split it across the middle, across the middle like that, horizontally, we can make it half and half. 2 equal parts. So let's go ahead and do that. Just like that. 2 equal parts would be 2 rows of 5 on one side and then 2 rows of 5 on the top here, which is the other side. Now that we've broken up the original array into 2 equal parts, how many rows do we have in each part? Great, I have 2 rows down here and then 2 rows up here. How many tiles are in each row? 5. So we're going to write 2 rows of 5 for each part of our number bond. Go ahead and watch. So the top part here, we have 2 rows of 5 and the other part down here, we have 2 rows of 5. If 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 represented the rectangle before we decomposed it or broke it up, so let's go ahead and write that down. So if 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 represented the whole rectangle before we broke it up and decomposed it, what number sentence can we use to describe each part? Take a look. We have 5, and remember we have 5 in each row. So we have 5 in each row, and we had 5. We remembered that 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 was the whole rectangle. Now, think carefully and looking at our picture here. What number sentence can we use to describe each part? Wonderful. It would be 5 plus 5 equals 10, and 5 plus 5 equals 10. Make sure you put the 5 plus 5 equals 10 number sentence under each part of the number bond, below the parts of the number bond. We can also be extra prepared and write down 20 for our whole amount, which 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 gives us the whole amount of 20. So then our 2 parts and the whole in a number sentence would be 2 rows of 5 and 2 rows of 5 make 4 rows of 5. Or looking at the picture, 2 rows of 5 and 2 rows of 5 make 4 rows of 5. Great job, my friends. I know this one was very tricky, so go ahead and re-watch this as much as you need to. Let's go ahead and jump straight into what I want you all to keep in mind before you start doing the independent work.
As you get ready to move into your independent practice and your exit ticket, please keep these 2 things in mind. Number 1, read the instructions carefully. Number 2, pay attention to whether they are asking for columns or rows. If you forgot what columns and rows are, please go back and rewatch the math vocabulary part of this video. It's very important that you know how to tell the difference between columns and rows. And lastly, let's review which pages you all are going to be working on. Work on pages 169 171, 172, and 181. Cut out page 186 and use the paper tiles to help you solve. If you need access to the worksheet, please click the link in the description box below. And if you don't have a printer, don't worry about it. Just write down the problems on a separate piece of paper and solve it on your own the best that you can. If you don't or can't cut out page 186, you may practice drawing like I did in the first part of the teacher model. That is also okay. If you have page 186, it will be much easier. All right, my friends, I'm looking forward to all of your wonderful work. Good luck, and I will see you all in the next lesson.